This is Don Cheadle, and you're listening to Jazziz, Not What You Think.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Jazz is Not What You Think. My guest this time around is actor and now producer, Mr. Don Cheadle. Don took at least two, pun intended, simultaneous giant steps in his role as director in a new movie where he also plays Miles Davis. The movie's called Miles Ahead, and for this role, Cheadle studied Miles while also learning to play the trumpet, and admits that the opportunity to be on the same stage with legends such as Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter and greats new on the scene like Robert Glasper, Antonio Sanchez, Esperanza Spalding in the final minutes of the movie was a dream come true. He even jokes about giving up his day gig and becoming a musician and touring. Anyway, in Don's movie, Miles Ahead, which is a name borrowed from a 1957 classic Miles Davis album, also called Miles Ahead, this takes place during Miles Davis' darkest years, which on one hand makes for an electrifying movie, and on another, as a fan of Miles Davis and a consummate actor, Cheadle takes liberty to juxtapose the facts, playing Miles with some truth, some history, but also some fiction. And he plays Miles to perfection. Over the last 3 decades, Miles Davis has appeared on more covers of Jazziz magazine than any other artist. In fact, one of the Jazziz magazine cover shoots has become a Miles Davis classic that's been used on posters, books, and t-shirts. And now you can get these collector's issues with great stories about Miles, including our latest issue with Don Cheadle on the cover, by simply becoming a subscriber to Jazziz. Just log on to jazziz.com. Also be sure to like us, subscribe, and to share our podcast with friends, or write a review so that we can keep these podcasts coming your way. But for now, enjoy a conversation with Don Cheadle. Well, thanks for doing this. It's great to have you here.
Oh, appreciate it.
Well, I guess I don't know if you had a chance. I sent you a bunch of covers over to take a purview, but whether you saw them or not, I wanted to jump into the movie. But before I do, one of the things I wanted to say is, someone is a actor, producer, author, humanitarian. Uh, from where I sit, loved by so many, an outspoken voice of reason about diversity, in especially in the film industry. I always found that very fascinating because I've been in the jazz business for 35 years, and I've seen some of those same issues, and I try to deal with them myself. And it's just wonderful that you take a position that is something that I find near and dear to me, and something that will kind of transition into what we want to talk to about Miles. Did you ever meet Miles?
I'd never met him. I did see him perform when I was 17 years old at Red Rocks in Denver, Colorado on the We Want Miles tour.
Wow,
He was
wow.
also billed there with Jeff Lorber, and Kenny G. Kenny G was playing with Jeff Lorber, which was,
Yeah.
and I did meet Kenny G. That was interesting.
Well,
And
well,
go ahead.
I just talked to Kenny G the other day,
Oh yeah.
and one of the things he told me, in fact, it came up in our interview, is that while a lot of the jazz police discredit his artistry, he said, "For God's sakes, I opened for Miles Davis." and
Yeah.
I, yeah, but and so the one thing that I really I love the movie, by the way, and I actually did get a chance to spend some time with Miles,
Oh, that's great.
and
I
in
think.
fact, that go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I said that's great, and then I said I think.
No, it was actually a wonderful experience. We uh, real short we wanted to do a cover shoot for a cover story on Miles, and I called his manager up, and he said that yeah, Miles didn't get into a photo shoot. He'd already done one, I think, with Herb Ritz and Andy Leibovitz, and he was like, he's not going to do anymore.
Right.
And I said, let me send Miles my photographer's book. Well, his manager called me back and said, "Hey, Miles really dug it. He wants to do it." So my photographer and his team and wardrobe, makeup, we had Armani provide the clothing, show up at Miles' house in Malibu, and Miles said, "Nah, I don't want to do it." So, so my photographer called me up, sort of freaking out, and he said, "What do I do?" And I said, "Just go talk to him." Well, he went back to the house, talked to Miles. Miles let him in. They had really a social event all day, and out of that photo shoot became that classic shot of Miles' finger to his lips.
Right.
And it was just a wonderful day that I know Jeff Sedlick, the photographer, will never forget. So, before we get directly into Miles, you're a big music fan.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Aside from Miles, what turns you on?
Oh man, there's just so much. I mean, it's hard to everything. I can't think of a music that I don't like when it's done well. I really can't.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I'm into all of the ways in which they refer to each other and show up in each other's, sort of musical style. I guess I don't like popcorn Disney kind of radio Disney music,
Hmm.
but other than that, I can kind of like get into a lot of all kinds of different music, world
How about
music. Yeah.
how about jazz? Any aside from Miles, any artists that you particularly gravitate to?
Oh my God. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody that played with Miles, Coltrane from Cannonball Adderley, which was like my first sort of entree into jazz because I played alto sax and would listen to his album in Spectacular and would listen to all of those tracks with my jaw on the ground, like how I don't know what I'm listening to because I'm playing the same instrument he's playing, but not really, like I don't know what this is. And, we had the old record players that you could, play the 33s at a 78 and they would be, it would be half as fast
Right. Right.
and almost half as fast, close enough that it was almost a full octave that you could hear what he was doing and approximate it kind of. It was at least slow enough that I could, transcribe the solos and transcribe the music. So that's a lot of what when I got into it early was when I was still in seventh, eighth grade.
So the son of a teacher and a clinical psychologist, did they push you towards music? I know there are some people that say that, I don't know if I want my son to be a musician or a doctor. Or, what was it like growing up in your house? Was there, I mean, an actor? Did they ever think that their son would become an actor?
Maybe I think that when I talk to other relatives, not my parents, but aunts and uncles and people that are older than my parents, even they're like, "Yeah, you used to say that all the time." I was like, "I did." I don't remember saying those things when I was 7 years old or 8 years old or 9 years old, but they said, "Yeah, you would talk about that." I don't recall that. To me, it was just always something that was fun. I kind of got into acting when I was in fifth grade and met a good teacher who really taught that well and taught music and did plays that I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, this acting thing. But at the same time, during the same years when I first started playing sax, I first started playing alto and really started getting into my mother and father had maybe 6 albums,
Hmm.
but one of them was Gil Evans and Miles Davis, Porgy and Bess,
Wow.
and another was Cannonball Adderley's strings, Cannonball Adderley with strings, and another one was Cannonball Adderley's Spectacular, and I would listen to all of those 3 albums until I wore the groove out. Listened to them all the time. So that was sort of at the bedrock of my musical experience. When I started getting into music, any kind of music. Actually, before that was probably really Motown and Stevie, but the instrumental stuff was jazz. Right after Stevie, it was jazz.
Wow. Well, um, interesting with your, with all the awards you've won, Screen Actors Guild, Golden Glove, Prime, Emmys, Academy Awards. It's interesting the evolution that when I follow you, I remember back, 20 something years ago, you were playing a role flipping burgers, then you were a DA, then a medical student, a detective, a hotelier, a dentist, certainly most recently a ruthless businessman and a superhero. But now you've become the superhero of music, that being Miles Davis. In fact, you are Miles, and I can tell you from spending a little time with Miles, and I think the artists and people that have been around him, you became Miles Davis. Did you have to study and talk to a lot of people to get that aura?
There are things that just sort of, like Vince talks about it with me a lot. His nephew, Vince
Hmm.
Wilburn, who played
Hmm.
drums with Tour, and he and Aaron too. When Aaron, his son, came to the set, because they visited the set when we were mostly we were shooting in the house, his apartment, the converted church there where he
Hmm.
lived with Francis and everything. And Aaron would just be staring at me, and I would be staring back at him because I wouldn't come out of character because I had to kind of stay and do my thing. But I'd see him and I'd kind of greet him, give him a hug, a pound, whatever.
Hmm.
And he would stay there for a couple minutes and he would be like, I gotta go. This is weird. This is too weird. And there were just things that, being, I think, from the same, my family's from that same area, Illinois, Midwest, Oklahoma, Missouri, that sort of belt right in there. And the way Miles used to chew his gum looked like my grandmother. You know what I mean? There was just we felt familial in a way to me that was kind of weird and eerie. And would see old pictures of him, and Vincent played me tape of him talking before he had destroyed his voice, screaming at somebody to get paid, and we talked similarly. So there was just a lot of stuff in the margins of it that was like, oh, that's cool. So I just have to really kind of go after this movie and go after this music and really do what I'm trying to do in the job and let the other stuff take care of itself. I don't have to really try to go too hard at that. I want to let it come to me and not kind of go out to grab it as hard, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. In fact, I was reading somewhere and it had an epiphany. It was kind of a twist of what someone else wrote. And it says, Don Cheadle is Miles Davis as Miles Davis in Miles
that's
Ahead.
that's always how I've wanted to think about it. It's like if people could understand that, then I think they would come to the movie with a different mindset than I'm seeing a movie about Miles Davis. It's like, no, you're seeing a movie about a Miles Davis that's going, I'm going to show you the movie that I'm going to be in. It's
Right.
which is a little different than,
Yeah,
so that's funny. I hope that gets proliferated because that's always how I felt about the movie.
I think it worked. And of course, with Ewan McGregor playing the Rolling Stone reporter, I thought that added a really interesting twist and kind of a little bit of a hook that really dragged you through. Because one of the things, there are probably going to be a lot of people that see that movie that maybe don't know Miles Davis. They may have heard of his name,
Yeah,
and
most.
now, yeah, and in fact, I think that kind of that tension between Miles and Dave Braden provided that, and it kept you engaged. And the interesting thing about that is, when someone says they love jazz, I always think, well, if they said it, they probably don't.
Right.
And I always then ask, what kind of jazz you like, and I'm usually disappointed. But
Yeah,
when
yeah.
when someone says they love Miles, I almost want to say to them, well, which period?
No question. And people are very protective of their Miles and are very definitive about when he was doing what they considered to be what it really should be, and then when he was doing some shit that they don't want to hear about. It's like those kinds of people of when they came into the knowing of Miles. What's been great is that I've met so many people lately, and maybe it's just because of their age, that had never even heard of Miles before Bitches Brew.
Mhm.
That was their entry point. They came to it from a rock and roll perspective, you know, through a fusion, through a electronic music. A lot of them because of a sample that they've heard or something. You know what I mean? In very elliptical ways that then opened the door to all of this music to them. So for them, it was just this great discovery of like, wait, he did stuff before Bitches Brew. And then, I recently met a few people that hadn't heard of him until the Tutu stuff. And,
Right.
Scritti Politti cover and Cyndi Lauper time after time and Michael Jackson, Human Nature. That's where they heard of Miles. They didn't know, oh, he did other stuff.
Yeah. And I found it very fascinating how you were able to bring in that other stuff, which, by the way, Miles would always say whenever you refer to his music as stuff. There was one time he was being interviewed by David Sanborn on a radio show. And David said, Miles, the stuff that I really liked, and there was like a 20-second pause on the air, and he said,
Uh-oh.
It ain't stuff.
Right. Right.
But I love the way you brought in Gil Evans.
Mm-hmm.
And because, for me, look, there's so many periods of Miles that I love, but the Miles Davis, Gil Evans period, you can play that for anyone, no matter what kind of music they like. And they're like, yeah, that's pretty great.
Yeah, it's so expressive and it's so, I mean, the fact that if you're going to talk about Porgy and Bess, the fact that it already kind of comes from such a theatrical place.
Mm-hmm.
It was like the perfect marriage of a theatrical, that Gershwin music with, or no, it's not Gershwin. Isn't that Leonard Bernstein? Wait, no,
yeah, Bernstein.
No, that's West Side Story, isn't it?
You're talking about Porgy and Bess?
Yeah, that's Gershwin.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that he, cause so you're already dealing with a sort of a really theatrical milieu, this storytelling, this this expansive. That's what that music is supposed to be able to support and inform, this big operatic kind of storytelling thing,
Yep.
which Miles it just made him more expansive. It was just like, what, and that they're playing pieces of the music that are his solos that they've now put into 9 pieces, with instruments that are not traditionally thought of as jazz instruments, and no piano, and just Teo's construction, just all of it is just fascinating to me. And his playing is so confident, and I just love that shit. And the sketches of Spain stuff and the Miles plus 19 and the Miles Ahead. Yes, I agree with you. All of that Gil stuff, not all of it, but a lot of it is some of my favorite music ever. Like I said, it was the first album that one of the very first albums that I plugged into Miles on was the Porgy and Bess stuff,
Yeah.
including the cover of the album. I mean, everything about it. I was like, oh, I love this thing.
Yeah, and I'm gonna age myself here, but I was born the year that Miles Ahead came out. So obviously I went back and listened to that music.
Right.
But it was, I did start getting into Miles through the later years, the electric.
Yeah.
Sorry, Miles stuff. But I did go back and I was fascinated with that period. The one thing I was thinking about too, this is your directorial debut, and I know there's been talk about how many years it's been in the works, but how long have you been thinking about doing Miles?
I literally was not thinking about it until it started being mentioned to me.
Yeah.
I was actually kind of over, quote unquote, doing biopics, and I had been famously in some of them, and Academy. I won the Golden Globe for playing Sammy, and was nominated for an Oscar and nominated for a Golden Globe for playing, Paul Rusesabagina, and had done the Goat and had played, then Talk to Me. I had played a bunch of historical characters.
Sure.
And one thing that I kind of was, I loved all of those experiences, but I was kind of realizing that you were always hamstrung by at least a version of the truth when you're playing these characters. If you wanted the story to go left right now just because you wanted it to, you couldn't. And it was not, that wasn't available necessarily. Although we also know, if we're being really circumspect, that all of those stories, there's tons of poetic license being taken because you're trying to cram a life into 90 minutes. You cannot do it. So characters are going to get omitted. Places are going to get repurposed. Things that you need to happen now to get to that scene are going to be wedged into happening now. Now there's an art in it, and it's all artful, and you're trying to be as respectful for the most part as you can to the quote unquote truth. But you're playing fast and loose with the facts always. So I was kind of over being in that. I wanted to play something close to me. I wanted to play something modern. And then someone said to me out of the blue, I think it was M2May first,
Hmm.
or that it came from M2May to somebody else to me. Hey, Miles Davis. And I was like, okay, I love Miles Davis. That's an amazing story. I don't think I could ever. That's something that I would never really. I don't know that I would ever want to take that on. That's what I thought about when it came up. Then it came up again through um, someone who came to set up my drums. Brought who played drums in the MJQ? Why am I going up on his name?
The Heath brothers? You
The
talking about?
Heat. Sorry, Percy came over
Yeah.
with a friend of mine to help set up my drums. I was like, oh shit, it's Percy Heath is setting up my drums and playing my drums. And when I was doing the Sammy Davis Jr. part, the
Uh-huh.
Rat Pack thing, I had to
Uh-huh.
play drums in it. So I bought a drum set to learn how to play, and he set up the drum set, and he said something about Miles, and I met a couple of writers who were working on a thing, and they said something about Miles. So it was all coming in, and then when Miles was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Vincent Wilburn, when asked if they were ever going to do a movie about his life, said, "Yeah, we are, and Don Cheadle's going to play him."
Great.
So I'm like, well, okay, I guess the gauntlet has been thrown down,
Well, you
and that's what it was 8 years ago.
wow. Well, I also found it really fun that you picked a period of Miles' life that was maybe his darkest time, but through that darkness, you can see good things.
Right.
And especially your portrayal of his wife Frances and the struggles that he went through. And what also came to mind to me for some of these great artists that make great music, that sometimes that great music comes out of adversity and struggle. And you were able to translate that to the screen
I mean,
because
yeah.
I'll go ahead.
I mean, I don't want to say that it can't happen without it, but it seems to me that there are so many great ones that we can think of, and not just obviously in this world, but in painting, in
Acting.
dance, and acting, and what there seems to be hand in hand this sort of they're a little off center, and they are as bandied about by the artistry that they've been cursed with having as they are in control of it. It's as
Hmm.
much in control of them as they are of it. It
Hmm.
feels like a lot of times. And maybe it's not in spite of those things that they have that they're able to create the stuff, but it is because of all of the stuff that they're eating. And I mean, metaphorically eating, you know,
Hmm.
and Miles was like that. He was voracious about life. So everything got consumed and it got used, and that's what came out of that vessel. Could it have done that without it? Did it require that? I don't know. I don't think anyone can say, but
Hmm.
that's what happened.
Yeah. Yeah, and the what I've been following, Miles and reading up on him for years, and the thing that I always amazed me, in addition to being an artist, he said some of the most profound things in some of his interviews.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
the quotes from Miles are they could be on those inspirational posters. The one you included in your movie. Sometimes you have to play a long time to be able to play like yourself.
Yep.
I mean, that's just that's deep. I play it and tell you when it is later. Or for me, music and life are all about style. He just the one thing that I also thought could have been a subhead to the headline of your movie would be wrong and strong.
Yeah.
I just love that aspect of the movie where he really believed that, and I think that really came across in the movie. I think that one of the things that I think a lot of people who will see you in it won't know that you actually played the trumpet.
Mm, yeah.
And so what was that process like, learning how to play trumpet?
Well, daunting. It's a very mean instrument in that you can't. it doesn't allow you to not. I don't know if it's mean, but it's demanding. I won't say mean. I'll say it's demanding, and that you can't fake it. There's no getting around. Either you're playing or you're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
If you put the trumpet down for 2 days, it's like you put it down for a year. For me, and you've got to get, you're going to have to get back to the trumpet at some point, during the playing of it. You'll find it again, but if you don't play every day, it's it's so hard.
But you not only play the trumpet, and it was, for those who understand music playing will actually see that you are really doing what trumpet players do. You seem to, especially in the rolling credits, seem to be having a great time on stage with Herbie and Wayne
Oh my
and
god.
Glasper and Espy and Antonio Sanchez and Gary.
I mean, how do you not? I mean, I was a pig in shit. I mean, that was the whole reason to do the movie, was really to do that. I was like, it's like, can we, and then at the end, do why I want to do the whole movie?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's, and having Keon playing, it was just that experience for me. I mean, really, I think if I could do that, I would trade all of I wouldn't do the acting stuff anymore. If I really had if I got in a comfortable enough place where, okay, the kids are through school and that's all paid for, and now the house is paid for, and this is da 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 da. Okay, I'm just gonna do that now, boo. You got the rest of this. I'm just gonna go play, because I've never had any experience of my life that's comparable to playing with musicians, and all of you communicating without using words, and getting to this place of understanding where something is going while you're making it go there at the same time. That's crazy.
Yeah, and you're doing it with the greatest musicians on earth.
That, yes, that are being deferential. That's
Yeah.
what was crazy to me. Is like, they're like, well, this is just like how Chief was, and they would start talking about, oh, you remember when we were in so and so on, and yeah, I remember when Chief came over and he said, and then Miles came over and kind of talked to us like that. They're just talking to me like, yeah, that's like when he did this and that, and so just direct us, just tell us what to do. Like, so Herbie's just asking me to like give him cues and tell him when to get in and out on solos, and like, are you crazy?
Yeah, yeah,
you know
yeah.
no.
Well, that's Herbie. I mean,
That's Herbie.
Herbie can play the jazziest thing you've ever heard, and then he'll
Funky
show up on a Michelle and Degiacello record, and you're like, wow.
funk, anything,
Had,
any
yeah,
milieu, any version of anything, and
yeah.
Wayne too. I
Wayne
mean,
too. Look, you
they're
know the
sick.
story with Wayne and the Steely Dan record, Asia.
Oh no, but tell it to me.
Oh, he's literally. They recommended to Donald Fagen and Walter Becker that they bring in, and this is the story that was told to me.
Uh-huh.
I actually asked Donald about it, and he said it was true. And they bring in this legendary saxophonist who Donald and Walter really, they of course they knew jazz, so they knew who he was, but Wayne was completely indifferent. He didn't know who Steely Dan was,
Right.
but agreed to go to the session, and he is listening in the ISO booth to the tracks being laid down for the title track Asia, and they said you could hear he was digging it, but he was kind of shaking his head like, yeah, this is going to definitely be more work. And he asked the guys if he could take a break. He went over to a grand piano and started writing out what he was going to play. And they're looking at him like, oh, I wonder this is going to turn out to be. And of course, he gets back into the ISO booth. The part comes in for him to do the solo to the title track Asia. And everyone in the studio's jaw dropped. And it was only supposed to go on for 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and it just kept going on, and they just didn't want it to stop.
How do you stop it?
Yeah.
You can't stop it. Yeah, we had a similar, I mean, I had the similar kind of a thing, because the day before, we were in the studio before we did the concert that appears on screen.
Mm-hmm.
And one by one, as these guys show up, it's just crazier and crazier. There's Herbie and Herbie, and there's Wayne, and I saw Wayne performing with SB at a benefit for his documentary that Herbie threw, and
Hmm.
I just went up and said, "Hey, I'm doing this thing. Herbie, I think is going to be in it. I would love if you want to play." He's like, "Yeah, when, where?" I went and asked Esperanza if she wanted to do it. She's like, "Oh, if Wayne's in it, yeah, I'll do it." I was like, "Okay, dope." I saw Antonio because I'd met him playing with Pat. And I was
Yeah,
like, "Hey, I'm gonna do this thing." He's like, "Yeah, whenever, wherever." I was just like, "Are you guys serious? You're
yeah,
gonna show up
yeah,
for real?"
yeah.
So then they all start coming in the studio, and we're just playing these tracks, and Wayne is just the suggestions and the things that they're thinking of and how they wanted to approach it, and then that they all dug it. That was the most amazing thing, that they were all in there nodding like, "Oh yeah, this is good." I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
it was just an amazing experience, worth
It
the
is.
whole thing.
Oh wow. And the look on SB's face when she's playing,
He's the best.
it's the best. Well, congratulations. It was it truly is. I realize that, and I think people will realize that this is a movie. They will see an artist who is one of the greats and will always be considered one of the greatest artists of all time, and you brought that to the screen, and we thank you for that.
Much appreciated.
And it was great talking to you.
You too. Thanks a lot.